Last Halloween, something happened that still keeps me up at night. I wish I could say it was just my imagination, but I have doorbell footage that proves otherwise. I live alone in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Every year I get maybe 20 or 30 trick-or-treaters, tops. I always buy extra candy anyway. This year, I set up my doorbell camera and settled in for the evening around 6 p.m. The first hour was normal. Kids came in groups with their parents. Superheroes, princesses, the usual stuff. I'd open the door, drop candy in their bags, and they'd run off to the next house. Everything was perfectly ordinary. Then at 7:15 p.m., a kid showed up alone. He was dressed as a skeleton, you know, the classic costume with the bones printed on black fabric. He had a plastic pumpkin bucket. I remember thinking it was odd that he was by himself, but maybe his parents were waiting at the sidewalk. I gave him a handful of candy and he left without saying a word. 20 minutes later, my doorbell rang again. I opened it and there he was. Same skeleton costume. Same plastic pumpkin. I figured maybe he'd circled back around the block. Kids do that sometimes, hitting the good houses twice. I laughed and gave him more candy. But then he came back at 8:02, then 8:23, then 8:47. Each time, same costume, same bucket, same silence. By the fifth visit, I stopped answering. I just watched through the peephole as he stood there, rang the bell, and eventually walked away. I thought maybe it was a prank. Some kid messing with me. But here's the thing, he never smiled. Never laughed. Just stood there with his bucket out waiting. And I started noticing something else. His costume looked exactly the same every time. Not wrinkled, not dirty, not displaced. Like he was reset between each visit. At 9:30, I checked my doorbell app. 7 visits. 7 separate recordings of the same kid. I scrolled through the footage. Each time, he approached from the same direction, walked the same path up my driveway, stood in the exact same spot. I zoomed in on his face. The skeleton makeup was painted on, but underneath, I could see his eyes. They were wrong. Too dark. Too empty. Like there was nothing behind them at all. And in the last few videos, I realized something that made my blood run cold. His mouth never moved, but I could hear him say "trick or treat" on the recording. By 10 p.m., it had been quiet for a while. Most of the trick-or-treaters had gone home. I turned off my porch light. That's the universal signal that you're done for the night. But at 10:17, my doorbell rang again. I didn't look through the peephole. I didn't check the camera. I just sat there in the dark, holding my breath. The ringing stopped. I waited 5 minutes and checked the footage. He'd stood there for 3 full minutes, perfectly still, staring directly at the camera. Then he turned and walked away. That was visit number 8. At 11:47 p.m., almost midnight, the doorbell rang again. Visit number 9. I didn't move from the couch. The ringing continued. Not a quick press, but one long, continuous ring that lasted almost 30 seconds. Then it stopped. When I checked the footage later, he wasn't at the door. The camera had triggered, but there was no one there. I went to bed around midnight, but I couldn't sleep. At 12:34 a.m., well after Halloween was technically over, my doorbell rang again. Visit 10? I pulled up the app. There he was. Same position. Same costume. But this time, his bucket was empty. Like he hadn't collected any candy all night despite visiting me 10 times. At 1:15 a.m., visit 11. This time, he stood closer to the camera. Close enough that his face filled the entire frame. I could see the cracks in his makeup, or what I thought was makeup. The lines looked too deep, too real. Like the skeleton wasn't painted on, it was showing through. The 12th time he came at 2:47 a.m. I was still awake, paralyzed with fear on my couch. The doorbell rang and I finally looked through the peephole. He was standing there, bucket extended. But his head was tilted at an angle that wasn't quite right. Too far. Too unnatural. And then he spoke. Not through the doorbell speaker, I heard it through the door. "You forgot to give me candy the first time." I don't remember what happened next. I must have blacked out or fallen asleep from pure exhaustion. When I woke up, it was dawn. November 1st. The candy bowl was still by the door, but it was completely empty. I had bought 5 pounds of candy, and I'd only given out maybe 2 pounds to legitimate trick-or-treaters. I checked the doorbell footage. All 12 visits were recorded. I watched them in sequence, and that's when I noticed something I'd missed. In each video, his bucket got a little fuller. Not with candy I gave him. I'd stopped answering after the 5th visit. But it was filling up anyway. In the final video, the bucket was overflowing. I went outside that morning to take down my decorations. On my porch, right where he'd been standing, there was a single piece of candy. One of those old-fashioned wrapped caramels that nobody gives out anymore. The wrapper was faded and yellow, like it had been sitting in a basement for decades. I didn't touch it. Later that day, I posted in my neighborhood Facebook group, asking if anyone else had experienced anything weird. One person responded. An older woman who'd lived here for 40 years. She said that in 1987, a boy went missing on Halloween night. He was dressed as a skeleton. They found his empty candy bucket 3 streets over, but they never found him. She sent me a photo from an old newspaper article. The missing boy was 8 years old. The picture was grainy, but I could make out his costume in the photo his parents had provided. It was identical to what I'd seen, down to the specific style and pattern. A costume from 1987. I did the math. If that boy had gone missing in 1987, he would have been trick-or-treating for 37 years. And if he visited 12 houses every Halloween, always coming back until his bucket was full, how many houses had he visited? How many people had seen him and thought nothing of it? That piece of candy stayed on my porch for 3 days. I was too scared to touch it. On the 4th day, it was gone. I don't know if an animal took it, or if the wind blew it away, or if something else happened to it. I tell myself it was the wind. Halloween is in a few days. I've already decided I'm not handing out candy this year. I'm turning off all my lights, unplugging my doorbell, and pretending I'm not home. But part of me wonders if that will matter. Part of me thinks that when you give candy to something like that, even once, you've made a connection. And it knows where you live. Last night, I got a notification from my doorbell camera. Motion detected at 2:47 a.m. I was too afraid to look at first, but eventually I checked. There was nothing there, just my empty porch. But if you look very carefully at the bottom corner of the frame, you can see it. A small shadow, about the size of a child. And it's holding something. If a trick-or-treater comes to your door more than once this Halloween, count how many times they visit. If they come back a 12th time, don't look through the peephole. Happy Halloween. And remember, always check your doorbell footage. Subscribe for more true horror stories. What's the creepiest thing that's happened to you on Halloween? Comment below.